Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back. It is Monday, and we are back on track and ready to attack. Many of you have reached out to me and asked me what I thought of this recent Joe Rogan interview with Jeremy Corbell, and we, of course, are going to get into it. Now, one thing that I want to be sure that I mention is that I have heard other show hosts who claim that they are offering you truthology for ufology, but they do their research by proclamation. Simply declaring that Jeremy Corbell has lied to you is not enough. You have to have the receipts for it. And unlike some other show hosts, we actually have real research, real data that we can support our arguments with. So, I suppose people have to make a choice whether they want to listen to people that are simply armchair lazy slobs that don't actually do any work. They just say, Jeremy Corbell's a liar. Why? So you have to establish that you have some data to support your arguments. And these lazy slob hosts that are on the take, and also supporting hoaxers, working for hoaxers and other people, they don't have any receipts. They don't have any data to share with you. I have an 8-year track record of following the Bob Lazar story down to the minute details, the minutia of the story. So for some other show host to be a lazy slob and do absolutely no research, no interviews, to my knowledge, this other show host has not conducted a single interview about the Bob Lazar case at all. He has not done a single minute of actual research other than what he finds on Twitter that people are talking about. That's not research. That's not proof. See, here we offer you actual research, actual proof. I have done an extensive amount of interviews on the Bob Lazar case, including with other researchers. And you can find all that on our channel. You go to the search bar and just search Bob Lazar. And you will see that we have an 8-year track record of looking into whether Bob Lazar is telling the truth or not. Other people don't do that work because they're lazy slobs and they just want to sit there and do research by proclamation. That's something that I am incredibly opposed to. If you're going to call somebody a liar, you should have some data, some evidence to support your arguments that they are indeed lying to you. Now, when it comes to Jeremy Corbell, Bob Lazar, George Knapp, and others who push this fairy tale, I have done the work, okay? I have done the interviews. I have interviewed other researchers who found a great number of problems, let's just say, with Bob Lazar's so-called true story. And we have done that over 8 years. So when some armchair researcher, right-click researcher whose only actual data source is UFO Twitter tells you that Jeremy Corbell or George Knapp or Bob Lazar are lying to you, ask them for the receipts. Ask them, where's your proof? Because they don't have it unless they cite our show, but they don't want to do that. They don't want to point you to where they're getting their actual evidence from. It's very clear that at least, one other show host, this right-click researcher, he's going to tell you that Bob Lazar and George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell are lying to you. And the reason that he knows that is because of the data that he is absorbing from our show here, our channel. But this lazy slob won't mention my channel because he is a bitter, angry little man. A bitter, angry little man, right? Now here, if someone has sufficient proof, evidence, first of all, we'll share it. But we first vet their evidence or research, and we have done that here. So when a right-click researcher, lazy slob show host tells you that Bob Lazar is lying without telling you where they came to that conclusion from or where they got the data to come to that conclusion from, it's very clear they got it from my channel here. We have an extensive bunch of Bob Lazar research here, and they don't. They got their assumptions or they got their proclamations of people being liars from our channel here, but they don't want to mention us because they don't want to admit, I'm a lazy slob. I actually did zero research. I just listened to Truth Seekers and he did all the work. But I'm going to claim that I know what's going on here with this story. It's disingenuous at best, and it's dishonest at worst. And, you know, there's nothing I can say about it except come to the real source of the information that people are trying to ignore. And maybe it's, you know, I take it a little personal when people digest all of the information that we have gathered here, all of the work that we have done here, and then just make proclamations and not tell people where they're getting the data to support their arguments. They're getting it here. So back to the actual Joe Rogan interview. I have a huge problem. Some of you know, however, that I am a big fan of Joe Rogan. It's one of the reasons I started a podcast. I've been listening to him since he started his podcast many, many years ago. And I'm a big fan of some of Joe Rogan's philosophy about living life to the fullest, pushing yourself, difficult situations, make the man. You know, so I don't want to be too harsh on Joe Rogan. Many people are trashing him. I saw somebody in the live comments earlier saying there's no way that Joe Rogan could be this stupid. Somebody had to pay him off. It's important to note that many people have suggested that Joe Rogan's, all of his comedy specials are on Netflix. And right before his interview with Bob Lazar and Jeremy Corbell, Jeremy Corbell's so-called documentary went to Netflix. Suddenly, Joe Rogan and Bob Lazar are on Joe Rogan. And Joe Rogan was all chips in on saying this story must be true. And, you know, it's unfortunate, but that, my friends, is a severe conflict of interest. If you're getting paid millions of dollars by the same company that is distributing this documentary that is filled with lies, half-truths, and fabrications, that's a real problem for me. That's certainly a conflict of interest. So I don't want to be too harsh on Joe Rogan, but I will point out that he has a severe conflict of interest. Here, we're not receiving any money from anybody to tell you whether a story is true or false. So people can believe whatever source of information that they want to. However, I'm confident that if you look at the body of work that we have done on the Bob Lazar case, and the fact that we do not have any financial motive to tell you one thing or the other, my conscience is clear. You know, we just followed the evidence everywhere it led, no matter where it led. It's also important to point out that I grew up with the Bob Lazar story. I'm one of the people that ordered that VHS tape from the back of a science magazine when I was, I don't know, I think I was like 11 or 12 years old. My father had to help me with the check. And by the way, Bob Lazar owes me $29.95 plus shipping and handling because he sold me largely a big lie. Now, I'm not sure where to begin with. If you haven't seen, I try to give this synopsis right now of the overwhelming evidence that Bob Lazar is a fraud and a liar. One of the big pieces of evidence is, I believe that if someone lies to you several times, then you can't believe that anything that they are telling you is honest and true. After all, if the person lied to you about 2 or 3 things, what's to say they're not lying to you about the rest of the story? All of Bob's Lazar story begins with, "I was a scientist." It can be substantially proven with facts and evidence that Bob Lazar is not now, nor has he ever been, a scientist. In order to be a scientist, you actually need a science degree. Now, I know all of you true believers of Bob Lazar are going to say that the government, once he came out with a story, erased his records. But the amount of mental gymnastics you have to do to believe that Men in Black explanation for why his educational claims are all fake is tremendous, because you would have to believe that 2 major universities erased his existence from their school. 2 major universities erased his master's thesis. He claimed to have a master's from both Caltech and MIT. They would have had to erase all records of Lazar ever attending their schools. They would have had to erase his master's thesis. Stanton Friedman and I talked extensively about that, and he even gave me the names and phone numbers of the legal departments at both of those schools. Do you have any idea what kind of a legal nightmare it would be for those schools to just erase somebody's master's thesis, erase somebody's diploma, erase the records of someone attending their school? Now, also interestingly, whether you believe her or not, Linda Moulton Howe has got an on-the-record statement. You can look for it here on our channel. It's a video that we've titled "Bob Lazar's Educational Claims Destroyed." And in that video, Linda Moulton Howe says she met Bob Lazar, and Bob Lazar said, "I never said I went to MIT. I just went there and I snuck into some of the science lectures and things because I was interested in science." That is a far cry from attending the school and getting a master's degree. The further evidence that we can cite about his educational credentials being completely and totally falsified are the fact that, again, back to the mental gymnastics. I know some people want to believe that the government just erased his going to those schools. Not true. Again, back to the mental gymnastics. In order to believe this Men in Black ridiculous explanation, and by the way, that's the explanation that all UFO con artists go to when they get caught lying dead to rights. You got to bring in the Men in Black. But in order to believe that explanation for why his educational claims are all fake, you would have to believe that the Men in Black tracked down every single person that went to both MIT and Caltech at the time Bob Lazar did. Then they would have to crawl into every other student's dusty attic, garage, crawl space, whatever, steal away all of their yearbooks. Every single one of them, every single student that went to MIT and Caltech, they would have had to steal away all those yearbooks, sanitize those yearbooks, make recreations of those yearbooks, erasing any mention of Bob Lazar from every single one of those yearbooks, then sneak back into every other student's homes and put them back wherever they found them. It would take an army of government workers a year probably to do that. I mean, I don't know how to estimate that. Maybe it would take them a few months, but the mental gymnastics to believe the government erased his existence stories is monumental. So if you're still clinging to the belief that he didn't lie about his educational credentials, even George Knapp admits nobody can verify his educational claims, and Bob may have lied about that just to get a better job or whatever the case may be. Jeremy Corbell has famously said things like, "You didn't ever lie to get a girl or get a job." Jeremy Corbell has to admit that Bob Lazar lied about his educational claims. They don't exist. There's no master's thesis. He has no other student that can verify he went to MIT, no other student that can verify he went to Caltech. He can't. When asked one time at a public appearance to name his professors, he named a high school teacher, or was it a community college teacher? The only education that we can for sure figure out that Bob Lazar had is high school, where he finished in the bottom third of his class. That's another argument. Friends, if you're in the bottom third of your class, you're not getting into MIT and you're not getting into Caltech being in the bottom third of your class. That is an impossibility. Further, Bob Lazar was at Pierce Junior College at the very same time, and that can be verified. He did go to Pierce Junior College, took one course in electronics. He was at Pierce Junior College at the very same time that he claimed that he was attending classes at MIT for a master's degree program. It doesn't work, friends. Additionally, Bob Lazar claimed that he got a degree in electronics technology from Caltech, a master's degree. At the time he claims he got that master's degree, Caltech did not offer a master's program in that subject at all. This can all be verified. So let's call that one for Bob Lazar is a liar. That's point one. Additionally, the other evidence that people who are believers of Bob Lazar love to cite is they love to say he was a scientist at Los Alamos, and people have confirmed that. He was even in a newspaper article as a physicist. Well, there's huge problems with that. And we will see the substantial evidence and proof of that. And I can show you, we actually interviewed this researcher. There's a previous show here where we went over this entire text, which I'm going to be sharing. And I have independently talked to some of the same people and verified that this researcher was absolutely correct in everything that he presented. So here we have, and you know what? I'm going to put this into the live chat, so please bear with me. I should put it in the description as well. We'll try to do that. But in case you want to follow along, we will be giving you the receipts. I've put this post into the live chat. So Lazar Lazar claimed that he was hired as a physicist at Los Alamos in May of 1982. Lazar says, I worked at Los Alamos National Lab. Knapp says, as a physicist, and Lazar confirms as a physicist. And we have the YouTube channel link here. You can listen to that whole interview. As evidence of his employment as a physicist, Bob Lazar, George Knapp, and others who have credited this story have pointed to a Los Alamos Monitor article published June 30th, 1982. The article, the writer of the article, Terry England, wrote the following. To Lazar, physicist at Los Alamos Mason Physics Facility, the important thing is the jet engine. It's something he's been working on for years. Whether or not Mr. England made any efforts to verify that Bob Lazar was, in fact, a physicist at Los Alamos has been debated ever since. In July of 2020, during Joe Rogan's podcast with Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, Corbell said that he had spoken with Terry England and asked him the question directly. This is a quote directly from Corbell. I finally got an interview with the guy that wrote the article 2 weeks ago. Very convenient. So the guy, Terry English, right. Finally, after all this time, he called me back 3 years late, you know. I put him in the movie and I said, look, here's the point. You said Bob Lazar was a physicist at Los Alamos. So how did you base that? You're writing a paper. And he goes, yeah. And it picked up by the AP News. And he says, Terry said this. If I had misrepresented that he was a physicist at Los Alamos, I would have been blackballed by everybody at Los Alamos. They take that very seriously. He was a physicist. I reported it. AP News picked it up. They repeated it. Not a word from anybody saying he wasn't a physicist at Los Alamos. And this is from the Joe Rogan Experience, number 1510. You can listen to that whole article. This researcher, who we interviewed previously here on Truth Seekers, said, I spoke with Terry England in August of 2021 to confirm the account that Jeremy Corbell gave of the conversation. England did not recall making the statements attributed to him by Corbell. Author, did you ever follow up to verify his claim that he was a physicist, or did you just take that at face value? Terry England says, I kind of took it at face value. I talked to a lot of guys up there at Los Alamos who were nuclear physicists, and I pretty much accepted what they said. Author, did you speak to some people to ask if he was a physicist? England, no. Maybe I should have, but I had no reason to doubt him at the time. Author, in Jeremy Corbell's recent documentary, he said he talked to you and you told him that you had confirmed he was a physicist. And here's another problem. Jeremy Corbell's documentary where he said this came out long before he claimed on Joe Rogan he had just spoken to this Terry 3 weeks prior. So did he make up? Did he just invent a quote from this person for the documentary? I believe that he did. England said, I don't remember saying that. It's possible, but I don't remember saying that because I don't remember doing it. Author, he said you told him if you didn't look into it, you would have been blackballed in the community. England, he said that? Author, yeah, England, I don't think so. In addition to England's recollection, he did not try to verify Bob Lazar's role at Los Alamos. Lazar himself gave an interview on the radio show, The Billy Goodman Happening, on December 20th, 1989, where he gives more detail about the timeline and nature of his role at Los Alamos. Lazar says, I have 2 master's degrees, one in physics, one in electronics. I wrote my thesis on magnetohydrodynamics. I worked at Los Alamos for a few years as a technician and then as a physicist in the polarized proton section dealing with the accelerator there. And this is from 1989. In this interview, a month after Knapp's first report identifying him, Bob claims that he was hired as a technician and remained in that role for a few years before becoming a physicist. However, Bob confirms in the Los Alamos Monitor article that he had only just moved to Los Alamos the month before. Separately, Los Alamos has verified that he began to work at the lab on May 18, 1982. If he had only begun to work at the lab little more than a month before his interview with Terry England for the Monitor article, he was a technician at the lab for a few months. He could not have been a physicist at the time the Los Alamos Monitor article was published. I am not aware of any lab employees who made public statements regarding Bob's work at Los Alamos. George Knapp has claimed that he has spoken with former employees who worked with Bob and verified he was a physicist. And here is where we get into George Knapp using made up fake sources. Why doesn't he name them? What do they have? Why would he hide these people that are verifying for him that Bob was a physicist there? Why doesn't he print their names? Let other researchers call them, talk to them, and verify that what Knapp is saying is accurate. I believe there's a big reason for that, is because these imaginary friends of George Knapp don't exist, because nobody else has ever been able to find anyone at Los Alamos that verified that he was actually a physicist. Those employees were friends of Lazar's and only specifically named Joe Vianetti as being the only one who confirmed it. However, Vianetti has never said anything publicly regarding Bob Lazar's role at the lab. There is substantial evidence Vianetti had a significant interest in UFOs and was involved in UFO research with Bob before and after Bob's claims to have worked at S4. And it's interesting, Bob claimed that he was never interested in UFOs before working at Area 51. We have on the record proof that, yes, he was interested in UFOs, even doing UFO research with a friend. Vianetti later attended media interviews with Bob and even plays a minor role in Bob's story, wherein he accompanies Bob to a Las Vegas casino for a clandestine meeting with Bob's former supervisor, Dennis Mariani. Now, here in this article, where we get to the real proof, I was able to verify 2 former lab employees who worked directly with Bob and able to speak to what he did at Los Alamos and the circumstances of his departure. The first former lab employee is a physicist who ran the lab that Bob claimed he worked in as a physicist, the polarized proton section. And here's the difference between us here and this researcher and Bob Lazar, Jeremy Corbell, and George Knapp. We give the names. This man's name is John Jarmer. Jarmer worked at the lab for over 2 decades in the polarized proton section. And again, this is the lab that Bob Lazar claimed that he was a scientist at. And we have written proof that he was a scientist there. John Jarmer, Bob Lazar, and Joe Vianetti's lab directory entries. Bob's friend and colleague, Joe Vianetti, who worked at the lab as a technician with him, is listed as an author on multiple original research papers alongside John Jarmer. So we can clearly determine that this John Jarmer worked at the lab as a physicist. Author, does the name Bob Lazar ring a bell? Yes, it does. I was just trying to verify that he actually was a physicist working on that polarized proton project. John, no, he's not a physicist to the best of my knowledge. Could you tell me what role you remember him having? John says, well, when I was at Los Alamos at the lab working, he did some electrical technician work that I'm aware of. There was no reference to him ever having a background in physics. If he does, he should be able to put forth his degree credentials wherever they're from. And we all know he can't do that. Author, could you tell me a little bit about what kind of work he would have done? John, possibly some electronics associated with the project he was working in support of. I mean, it could be. I'm not saying this is anything related to what he's claiming, but he may have done. But as an example of what support electrical tech would do, would be if you were setting up an experiment and you needed to have an interface module to go between detectors that were being used, interfacing to the computer and putting that system together, and the cabling. That would be an example. Not what he may have done, but what a support tech would do. Author, was the lab closed to the public? Would you have to go through security to get there? Yes. You would have to have a clearance and a badge to be able to get into that site where I worked. So he would have had clearance. John, I don't know the status of any clearance he would have had, but you did have to show an ID badge to have access to the site. Author, did you have any experience with him? What was your read on him? John, he was there for a limited period of time. He didn't overly impress me as being the sharpest knife in the drawer or anything like that. That's what I'll leave it at. Author, you were there for the whole time he was there. John, I retired in 2006, so that span that I was there would have covered the time he was there. Author, I've heard the reason that Bob lost his job is that he was using government property to work on personal projects. John, I don't have any comment relative to that. A brief follow-up was interviewed. John, when he worked for my section, I couldn't even remember the length of time, but it wasn't that long. But I can't make any comment on what happened after he wasn't working with us. When I say us, I mean myself and the technicians that were working with me. But he worked as an electrical technician in his capacity in your lab. John, yes, that's correct. Would you have any reason to believe that he moved into a higher role? John, no, as I said, pardon me, when he stopped working with us, he was, I'll use the term, a temporary guy that was working with us. This statement is also supported by the fact that next to Bob Lazar's name was the initials KM, Kirk Meyer, who hired temporary employees for Los Alamos, people like electronics technicians. Kirk Meyer never, ever hired physicists for the lab, only low-level electronics technicians, subcontractors. I'll use the term a temporary guy that was working with us. After he stopped working with us, I didn't follow him any way, form, or fashion. I got on with the detailed work that our section was involved in and moved on from that point. If he worked at the lab after he worked for us in the polarized target section, then he would be able to give the name of the group or individuals that he worked with. Bob Lazar has never given any names of people that he worked with at Los Alamos because he didn't want people to find this, the true and real accurate information, in that Bob Lazar was a low-level electronics technician. He was never a physicist. Author, do you happen to remember the name of the other technician that worked with Bob? I believe Joe Vianetti was one of them, but my understanding was that there was three. John, Joe Vianetti was one for sure. I would have to think about that for a while, but I would say what the other technicians are. Now we get a secondary source that confirms that Bob Lazar was never a physicist. This is a second source that we can verify actually worked at Los Alamos at the time. And this source indeed says that Bob Lazar was never a physicist. He was not a scientist. He was an electronics technician. So here we have on the record sources an actual verifiable proof that Bob Lazar not only lied about his education, but he lied about ever being a scientist. Bob Lazar was never a scientist. He cannot provide any evidence or proof that he was indeed ever a scientist. He cannot show you one coworker that will verify he was a scientist. He cannot offer any paperwork or proof or evidence that he was ever a scientist, especially at Los Alamos. He was just never a scientist. Therefore, he was never a scientist at Los Alamos. And see, here is the difference between George Knapp, Jeremy Corbell, Bob Lazar, and us here. We're not making money selling you the Bob Lazar true story. Those people are making money. It's a conflict of interest. And here we did indeed talk about the fact that people have conflicts of interests. Money is certainly a conflict of interest. Jeremy Corbell will not address all of this information that I've just shared with you. Why not? Isn't it overwhelming evidence that Bob Lazar lied about being a physicist? Why won't Jeremy Corbell or George Knapp address these on-the-record sources that we can verify actually worked with Bob Lazar at the time Bob Lazar worked at that lab, both of which say Bob Lazar was an electronics technician. He was never a physicist. Now, some people may argue with me. Who cares if he was a scientist or a physicist? Or excuse me, a scientist or a physicist or just a technician. The important part is that he worked on those alien flying saucers. Well, you know, I would submit to you that if he's willing to lie about what his actual job title is, you know, this whole I worked at Los Alamos as a physicist, it lends credibility to his story. But if we strip away that layer of so-called credibility, and actually it becomes a detriment to his story, his statements about being a physicist. If his statements about being a physicist at Los Alamos are verifiably fake, that doesn't lend credibility to his story. It casts a huge shadow of doubt onto his honesty, integrity, and ethics. Why would you lie about being a scientist at Los Alamos unless he was trying to create credibility for himself and sell his fake story? Now, we do have a clip to share. I'm going to cite fair use. This is a transformative work. We are educating the public about well-known UFO figure Bob Lazar, who claimed he worked on alien spacecraft. And this is a recent interview. By the way, did anybody know this? If you upload a clip of the Joe Rogan show to your own YouTube channel, not only do they copyright claim it, they block it. You can't play it. I never knew that. I tried to upload this so that it would be commercial free. I'm always annoyed when the commercial kicks in and I have to stop share screen and go back to it. But we're just going to have to deal with that for this. So I apologize for that. And recently, Jeremy Corbell is defending Bob Lazar and his story. But here's what I would say to Joe Rogan if I got the chance. I would say, Joe Rogan, you have stated multiple times, including in a recent Lex Friedman interview, that you terribly want to believe that Bob Lazar is telling the truth and that you didn't smell any bull. You wanted to meet him in person, talk to him, and see if you smelled any bull. Did Jeremy Corbell give you all of the information? Or did he withhold from you all this information which would prove that Bob Lazar is a bull artist, is a liar? Why would he purposefully not give you the evidence that Bob Lazar lied multiple times, Joe Rogan? Is it because he has an agenda and he wants to use you to push the story and to get more hits on his Netflix documentary so that he can make more money selling this garbage story? And Joe Rogan, did you know he mentioned on this recent podcast interview with you that Jeremy Corbell brags that he hung out with Bob Lazar's mom and family members? I believe Bob Lazar, he hung out with Bob Lazar's sister as well. Why didn't Joe Rogan ask Bob Lazar's mother and sister if they attended his MIT graduation, if they attended his Caltech graduation? That would be confirmation that Bob Lazar was telling the truth about actually attending those schools and actually having degrees. No one else has ever been given access to Bob Lazar's mother. No one else has ever been given access to Bob Lazar's sister or other family members. Only Jeremy Corbell has been given that access. And I would submit to you, Joe Rogan, or anyone within the sound of my voice, that Jeremy Corbell, by the way, he once lost his shit on a podcast yelling about this very question that I've posed here. Why did Jeremy Corbell not verify with his mother and sister that he went to MIT or Caltech? Or did he? I believe that he didn't ask them because he knew that Bob Lazar lied about going to Caltech, because he knew that Bob Lazar never attended MIT. You're the only person in the history of this story, Jeremy Corbell, to ever be given access to his family members, and you didn't bother to ask them about his educational claims, which to this day he still swears by and swears that the men in black and the government erased his records. No, Jeremy Corbell was either crafty enough to know that they were going to tell him something he didn't want to hear. Like, no, we never attended Bob Lazar's graduation at MIT. No, we never attended Bob Lazar's graduation at Caltech. And speaking as a parent, and I'm sure there's many parents out there, if your son had gone to MIT or prestigious school like Caltech and got a master's degree, wouldn't you attend his graduation ceremony? Wouldn't you hang up a copy of his degree in your house because you're so proud that your son graduated from MIT or Caltech? No, Joe Rogan, Bob Lazar either didn't ask those questions to his family members because he knew Bob Lazar lied, or he did ask those questions, didn't like the answers that he got, and it wouldn't support his agenda, which is telling people this story is true, so he cut that from the film. And by the way, I asked at the time the film was made, I messaged him and said, why didn't you ask Bob Lazar's mother if he ever attended his Caltech or MIT graduation? I have a clip somewhere, couldn't find it at the time of this broadcast, but Jeremy Corbell lost his mind. How dare he say, how do you know what I asked his mother? Publish it. Publish it, Jeremy Corbell. If you ask Bob Lazar's mother if she attended his graduation to those two schools, publish it. Let's see the clip of you asking the mother of Bob Lazar if he's a liar or not. You didn't ask, or you did and you cut it. And you won't release what his mother and his sister said about attending his MIT graduation, about attending his Caltech graduation. For anyone to suggest that somebody's mother would not attend their MIT graduation had they actually gone there is absolutely ludicrous. But this is where we're at with this story. We have to do a tremendous amount of mental gymnastics. Well, maybe his mother was busy and couldn't go to the MIT graduation. Maybe Bob was too busy being a scientist after he got his degrees, and even he didn't go to his graduation, so his mom and his sister didn't go. Great. But let's talk to the mother. Oh, that's right. I can't talk to the mother. You can't talk to the mother. Only the people profiting from this fake story get access to Bob Lazar's mother. Only the people making money selling this garbage fairy tale get access to Bob Lazar's sister, Bob Lazar's mother. Only those two. And they have a responsibility then. It's on record that you two clowns got access to Bob Lazar's mother. You two clowns got access to Bob Lazar's sister. Then let's see what happened when you asked them if they attended Bob Lazar's graduation at both schools. Or are you hiding the truth? Because it doesn't fit your narrative that the story is true. We can also get into the situation of the propaganda that people spew about Bob Lazar constantly, including Jeremy Corbell, claiming that Bob Lazar, well, he passed 4 lie detector tests. Bullshit. Bull. He never passed 4 lie detectors. And by the way, we did an entire piece on that. Just search Bob Lazar in the search engine of our channel here, and you will see Bob Lazar lie detector tests, exposed. Terry Tavernetti, who is a close friend of Bob Lazar's, is the person that administered those lie detector tests. And even Terry Tavernetti admitted that Bob Lazar failed the first lie detector tests. So he gave them more. Friends, we reached out to the National Polygraph Examiners Association and showed them what Terry Tavernetti did. And everyone there said, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. If you give somebody a polygraph and they fail the first one, that's it. They failed the first polygraph. They showed deception. That's it. You do not continue to administer polygraph exams until the subject passes them. Only someone trying to bolster the story, and by the way, those lie detector tests were conducted while Bob Lazar's entire story was falling apart, thanks in part to the research of Stanton Friedman, who went to MIT, who went to Caltech, who looked up the yearbooks. The entire Bob Lazar story was falling apart, and suddenly George Knapp gets his good friend Terry Tavernetti to administer polygraphs and claims that Bob Lazar passed 4. But they don't tell you that he failed the first one. If you fail your first polygraph, it's game over. That's it. You also don't just continue sending a subject to multiple polygraph examiners. I mean, maybe you do. Maybe one was inconclusive. Okay, give him another one. The first thing, it comes, to the best of my recollection, the first came back inconclusive. Then George Knapp gets his very close friend, Terry Tavernetti, to administer 4 more tests, and he failed the first one. So we've got inconclusive, failed, pass, pass, pass. We don't have him. He never passed 4 lie detectors. And for someone to suggest that is extremely dishonest. And did you know the only people suggesting he passed 4 polygraph exams are the people profiting from this fake story? And they do the typical lie by omission. Let's leave out that 1 test came back inconclusive. Let's leave out that 1 test came back as deceptive. We have Terry Tavernetti on the record. I began administering the first polygraph tests, and just as I suspected, it came back deceptive. But somehow, Terry Tavernetti made statements later claiming that if Bob Lazar was lying, he ought to be in Hollywood. Well, which is it? Was he deceptive, or was he truthful, and if he was lying, he should be in Hollywood? There's all these conflicting statements from this close friend of George Knapp, the guy making millions selling this fake story, that about the lie detectors. Why can't we get a straight answer? And why, George Knapp, can we not get the charts? I want to see the charts for every lie detector test that Bob Lazar took. Nobody gets to see the charts. There's a reason for that. If Bob Lazar had truly passed 4 lie detector tests, we would all be allowed to see the charts. We could take them to an independent polygraph examiner who's familiar with polygraph charts and say, here's the charts. Is this person being truthful or not? There's a reason they won't release the charts. It's because 1 was inconclusive and 1 he failed because he was being deceptive. So now we're going to cite fair use, and we will. And one final point I want to make, and this is for the benefit of Joe Rogan. Why would you? Don't you have a responsibility to your listeners? Why would you have somebody on your program who is only giving you half the story he makes money from, that the story is true? He's not giving you all of the other evidence. We have all the other evidence here. We have a mountain of substantial and supportive evidence to prove that Bob Lazar lied multiple times. He lied on a lie detector. He lied about his education. He lied about what he did at Los Alamos. We also have substantial and supportive proof with an on-the-record source that was a security specialist who said, on the record, Bob Lazar never flew into Area 51. Bob Lazar never flew out of Area 51. Bob Lazar was never checked into Area 51. Everyone coming in or out of Area 51, according to multiple sources, including this security specialist, who we can verify worked there at the time Bob Lazar did, says you're checked in to the Janet flight when you get on the airplane. When you get off the Janet flight at Area 51, there is another check and log. Once you step foot on Area 51, you are logged. as being on Area 51. When you step foot off of Area 51, you are logged leaving once again. When you step foot back onto the airplane to depart, you are logged once again. And when you step foot off the Janet airline in Las Vegas, you are logged once again. We have an on-the-record source that we can verify worked at Area 51 as a security specialist who says Bob Lazar is not in any logs. Not in the flight in logs, not in the flight out logs, not in the check into Area 51 logs, not in the check out of Area 51 logs. But I hear you true believers saying, but Bob Lazar never said he worked at Area 51. He worked at S4. Bob Lazar, Jeremy Corbell, and George Knapp all say that Bob Lazar flew into Area 51 on Janet Airlines. But our on-the-record source can prove that that is verifiably false. It's not true. He never flew on Janet Airlines. He would be in the logs. He never stepped foot on Area 51. He would be in the logs. But then, of course, I hear all you people, you true believers, you got to do the mental gymnastics. Well, they erased him from the logs, except our on-the-record source checked immediately upon first hearing Bob Lazar's story. The very second broadcast where Bob Lazar's name was released, this security specialist started checking all the Area 51 records, found nothing. He also, by the way, drove to the Papoose Lake area, drove right up to the mountain. Nothing. There's nothing there. There's nothing that Bob Lazar, George Knapp, or Jeremy Corbell described at this so-called mythical location, S4, which does not exist. There's nothing there that Bob Lazar described. There's no road. There's no guard shack. There's no hangars in the mountain. This security specialist went right up to the mountain. There's nothing there. And he did so at the time that Bob Lazar first came out with his story. So don't come to me with your mental gymnastics saying, well, they moved the base because it was exposed. No, this security specialist went there right at the time that Bob Lazar's story first broke. There was nothing there. No guard shack, no road, no hangar bay doors. Nothing was there. And here's again another difference between us here and George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell. George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell claim they have all this proof that Bob Lazar flew on the Janet Airlines. Show us. Show us. I show everyone my on-the-record sources, and any other researcher can go and talk to that source and get the same story, more or less, out of the same source that I did. But Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp have anonymous sources that no one else is allowed to talk to. So their proof amounts to, trust me, I talked to people that worked with Bob, that flew into Janet Airlines with him, that seen him at Area 51. Trust me, dude. I'm not trusting UFO profiteering hucksters that have made millions of dollars selling this fake fairy tale. I want on-the-record sources, or they don't exist. It's very simple. Why would somebody who has absolutely verifiable proof that Bob Lazar flew on Janet Airlines not give out their sources so other researchers can verify the same thing? There is a reason they won't share their sources, and I will. We have the truth on our side, and anyone can go and find the truth that we have found. Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp hide their sources, claim they have sources, but no one gets to see their sources. No one gets to talk to their sources. Why is that? Isn't that suspect? Doesn't that give you doubt that they're being honest when they say they have 100% proof that Bob Lazar flew into Area 51? We have 100% proof he never flew into Area 51 and never stepped foot on a Janet Airlines or on the Area 51 base, as he, Corbell, and Knapp have claimed for years. Those two have apparently imaginary friends that say Bob Lazar worked there, so you should trust them. We have on the record real sources. You can call that person. You can talk to them, and you'll get the same answers that I did, and Victor Caliero and others who have talked to that security specialist who worked there at the time. An on-the-record source is worth 100. anonymous sources nobody's allowed to talk to. Now, I realize that sometimes people don't want to give their real name or want to remain anonymous, security clearances. That's the excuses they give. But these are largely excuses which allow these UFO profiteering hucksters to make ridiculous statements like George Knapp, I think, has said that he's talked to 20 plus people that verified parts of Bob's story. Give me their names, George Knapp. Give me their names, and I'll do a special project where I will talk to all 20 of those sources. And we will see if you told the truth when you said they all verified Bob Lazar's story. Why can't I talk to those same people? Why can't I interview the same sources that you're claiming are proof that you have kept anonymous for 30 years? And while we're on that subject, now we have both both George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell both saying they know where element 115 is buried. If they had absolutely incontrovertible proof, these two UFO hucksters, of alien visitation on Earth, don't you think they would throw it down on the table and say, there's the proof, bitches? But they never do. They just say things. Oh, we know where the element 115. George Knapp said, I know where some of that element 115 is buried, and someday I'm going to dig it up. Well, what are you waiting for, George? We're all waiting for this overwhelming proof and evidence of alien visitation on Earth. Friends, if he indeed had that, it would be all over. It would be on CNN and Fox and C-SPAN, and it would be on every channel on Earth and on every show on Earth. Incontrovertible proof of alien visitation on Earth. You mean to tell me that this clown of a reporter whose only claim to fame is this fake Bob Lazar story really has absolutely incontrovertible proof of alien visitation on Earth, and he's not going to pull it out? He's just going to leave it buried somewhere? And Corbell has said similar nonsensical things with no evidence, no proof. Great, Corbell, dig it up. Let's see it. Let's see this mythical element 115. All right, so let's get to the video. We're already running very long. Listen, when it comes to this story, you know, people have to weigh. I think you should weigh things with a scale. We have on the record sources, right? We have on the record sources. We have proof that anybody else can verify, and they have anonymous sources. Do you see? The scale blows this away. And in full disclosure, I grew up with this story. I'm one of the stupid kids that Bob Lazar scammed out of $29.95 for his VHS tape about this story that he and Gene Huff put together and sold in the back of science magazines. I also bought that Tesla model. So the truth be told, Bob Lazar owes me, I think, somewhere around $50. Plus, I bought this garbage documentary from Jeremy Corbell, or I signed up. I don't remember. I think I had to sign up for some service like Amazon Prime or something in order to see the documentary when it first came out. These guys ripped me off for a fake story. I think they should have to give me the money back. But let's get to the video. And again, we're going to cite fair use. This is a transformative work. We are educating the public. We are going to critique and discuss the video that we are sharing. This is from Jeremy Corbell's recent appearance. And by the way, I didn't have time to clip everything. But actually, before we do that, let's see if we can't find something else that I wanted to share. One moment. It's important to note that Jeremy Corbell makes a lot of ridiculous statements. Most recently, he has claimed that the United States government are shooting at UFOs and UAPs. Again, we're citing fair use. This is a transformative work. We're educating the public about how UFO circus ringmaster Jeremy Corbell, UFO profiteer and huckster extraordinaire, like to make nonsensical, absolutely fantastical, ridiculous claims and then offer absolutely no evidence. Let's get into it, friends.
My question is, when there are unsubstantiated claims or manufactured claims of UAPs or kind of false information that's put out there.
Yeah, I have seen the logs. I have seen the videos. We have attempted shoot downs of UAPs on a regular basis. We're talking as recently as last Friday.
My question is, when there are unsubstantiated claims or manufactured claims of UAPs or kind of false information that's put out there.
I have seen the logs. I have seen the videos. We have attempted shoot downs of UAPs on a regular basis. We're talking as recently as last Friday.
My question is, when there are unsubstantiated claims or manufactured claims of UAPs or kind of false information that's put out there.
I have seen the logs. I have seen the videos. We have attempted shoot downs of UAPs on a regular basis. We're talking as recently as last Friday.
And by the way, I have reached out to Pentagon spokesperson Susan Gone, however you say her name. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing it. And I haven't received any confirmation back. But the questions that I asked are very important, because while Jeremy Corbell is lying to you, claiming that he saw logs and he has verifiable proof and evidence that we're shooting down UFOs, it's important to note that anybody that's stationed on a ship that sends him logs from a Navy ship would be violating their security oath. They would be immediately expelled from their job in the military and prosecuted. Jeremy Corbell, if he was in receipt of classified information and logs about shooting and military actions on a Navy ship, certainly would be classified. At least I'm told by a Navy source that would be classified. If a Navy ship is anywhere and has to shoot at something, the logs of that event are classified until the whole event is investigated. But we're all supposed to believe that Jeremy Corbell is so important that people are risking their jobs, risking their pensions, and risking criminal prosecution to share with him classified information about military actions taking place on Navy ships. Friends, if he was in receipt of anything classified like that, he would be prosecuted. The feds would be knocking on his door already. So I take the fact that the feds are not knocking on his door and he's not being prosecuted as proof that he doesn't actually have access to any logs. He never actually read anything, which leads me to believe that he's just making this stuff up, or somebody told him it and he's repeating it, which makes him a useful idiot to the CIA psyops that have been going on surrounding this UAP UFO event for all of this time now. For 70 years, the government has been carefully curating what information, 70 plus years, they have been carefully curating what they want the public to believe about this phenomenon. It's so important that you realize that, remember not long ago, Jimmy Church and Richard Dolan also claimed to be in possession of classified information. We did a show here talking about how ridiculous that claim was and the fact that they would be prosecuted, the person that leaked it to them would be prosecuted, and so forth. And suddenly, both those clowns started walking it back. Well, I saw notes that somebody, I don't have any classified information. These people bluff. This is a bluff. I believe this is a bluff by Jeremy Corbell. He's bluffing. Somebody told him something and he's repeating it, but that's not good enough. He can't just say, well, I talked to some guy on a Navy ship who told me that they're, because that's not a juicy enough story. He has to bluff that he's seen classified logs and classified information about military actions being taken as early as last Friday. No, friends, we will continue to follow up with the Pentagon. I want to know from the United States Pentagon, if people are sharing with him classified information, why are those people not being investigated who are sharing with Jeremy Corbell, a UFO huckster, classified information? And by the way, Jeremy has been wrong how many times? Remember the pyramid-shaped spaceships? That all turned out to be bullshit. And the Pentagon confirmed that those were just drones. And the reason it looked like a pyramid was because of the lens artifact, bokeh, just as Mick West has described. This guy just bluffed that he seen logs, which would indicate that he has classified information in his possession, which would further indicate that he is right now in danger of being prosecuted for the Espionage Act. And while we're on that subject, Bob Lazar has never been prosecuted. You know, real whistleblowers like Snowden or WikiLeaks or, you know, Chelsea Manning, they have consequences. They get arrested. They do jail time for leaking classified information or for even being in possession of classified information. Why is Bob Lazar not been prosecuted? Could it be because he's not leaking classified information? It's a fairy tale. Why is why is Jeremy Corbell not being prosecuted for being in possession of Navy logs about military actions taking place as recently as last Friday? The feds would be at his door. They would serve a search warrant on all of his residences to get back that classified information. Go ask somebody that actually knows something about this. He knows nothing about this. He's just oh yeah, I've seen the logs. Sure you have. Do you realize that you just admitted that you are looking at classified information, that your sources are sending you classified information, and you could be prosecuted for even looking at any of that? That's a problem, friends. That's a real problem. And he won't explain this problem, and neither will anybody else that gets caught bluffing that they're in possession. All these guys love to pretend that they have secret information. And you'll notice with Corbell, he's always got some secret information, and when it drops, it's going to change everything. But he can't give it to you yet. And he can't share it with anybody, and nobody else is allowed to see it or verify it. It all comes back to, trust me, dude. All right, so let's get into this. Again, we're going to cite fair use. This is transformative work. I don't know how much of this clown I can take, but this is his recent appearance on Joe Rogan. This is please pardon the interruption, but it would appear that during our earlier broadcast, we used a very short segment of the Joe Rogan experience. And I was not aware of this, but now I am. If you play any portion of the Joe Rogan experience on YouTube, even if you are commenting on it, critiquing it, and cite fair use before doing so, they block your entire broadcast from being viewed. And this, of course, is news to me. I've never shared a Joe Rogan clip before, but apparently they are very, very stringent on that. I received this shortly after the broadcast. Hi, Truth Seekers. A copyright owner using a content ID has claimed some material in your video. As a result, your video has been blocked and can no longer be played on YouTube. This is not a copyright strike. This claim does not affect your account status. So basically, they blocked our entire earlier broadcast from being viewed at all because we used a clip. So, you know, there's not much that I can do about that. It's unfortunate, but this is what happens. So I thought the best way to fix this is to simply redo that portion of the show where I played the clip. I can make the same points. I have taken quotes from both Joe Rogan and Jeremy Corbell to kind of try to fill in the blanks. And so that's what I'm going to do. Now, I will be sharing a still. I'm not going to play the video, but I'm going to show a still of the video. Hopefully, this won't get blocked or copyright claimed. It's simply a still from their interview. And we are citing fair use to even show that. I'm very disappointed that an entire 2-hour, 30-minute broadcast can be just blocked from YouTube because you played a clip that you were critiquing, using for educational purposes, offering commentary over. We stopped the video every so often and talked over it. But, these things happen. There's not much that I can do about it. So in an effort to still make this broadcast available to you, we're cutting out the clip, and I will simply be sharing my thoughts on what it is that they spoke about. So I will be sharing simply a still of their interview. Apparently, I can't play the video at all, or the entire broadcast here will be blocked in all territories. They block it worldwide. Wasn't aware that you can't play any clips from Joe Rogan, but I am aware that I have seen many YouTube channels essentially stealing his clips and monetizing them. So in some ways, as a content creator, I don't blame them or him for the fact that you can't really share a clip from his show without consequences and your entire video being blocked. I think that's a bit heavy-handed, especially for people like me who often cite and use the principle of fair use when covering these things. But it is what it is, friends. So what I have here is some of the more memorable moments from just this clip where Jeremy Corbell defends Bob Lazar. It is important to note that I believe that there is a big problem with Jeremy Corbell essentially lying to Joe Rogan by omission. Because the truth is, friends, if I am in possession of all of this evidence that Bob Lazar is a fraud and a liar, so is Jeremy Corbell. He's simply not giving it to Joe Rogan. He's only giving Joe Rogan half the story, which is essentially the same thing he's doing with all of us. He has a very carefully crafted narrative that Bob Lazar is telling the truth, and this is a true story. But in order to make that story work, and that carefully created narrative, in order to have that narrative make sense or work, what you have to do is leave out all the evidence that we are freely sharing with you. He has to leave out the evidence that Bob Lazar lied about his education. He has to leave out the evidence that Bob Lazar lied about being a scientist. He has to leave out the evidence that Bob Lazar once bragged and lied and said he had a particle accelerator in his bedroom that he could transmute elements with. That is scientifically impossible. Ask any physicist. The problem here is lies by omission. He also doesn't tell Joe Rogan or anyone else that Bob Lazar failed lie detector tests. No, Jeremy Corbell will tell you he passed 4 of them after one was inconclusive and one was failed. He doesn't leave, he doesn't give you the entire story. It's a cherry-picked narrative of evidence or so-called evidence that he offers you. These lies by omission is exactly how and why he's able to fool someone who I suspect is highly intelligent like Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan hasn't dug deeper. He hasn't looked for the evidence that Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp and Bob Lazar are not willing to give him. But we are willing to give both Joe Rogan and everyone within the sound of my broadcast and my voice all of the evidence, and you can make up your own mind. I believe that really Joe Rogan has an awesome responsibility. He should look further into things before he lets someone literally straight lie. And that's what happened during this broadcast. We can prove it. Jeremy Corbell lied multiple times just during this 15-minute clip. He lied, and we can prove it. And we've got the receipts to prove it. And we've got on the record real sources with real names where we can verify their education. We can verify their credentials. We can verify where they worked at. We have real sources and real names of people. Who does Jeremy Corbell cite? He cites people. That's what he says. There's people that told me, which basically means that Jeremy Corbell's evidence does not boil down to real names and real people that you can talk to. It boils down to, I suppose, his imaginary friends that no one else is allowed to interview, no one else is allowed to talk to. His evidence boils down to, trust me, bro, people told me. That's not good enough when you're making extraordinary claims, okay? So what we have here is, in this short clip, is, first of all, Joe Rogan claims that liars don't just lie one time in their life. They lie a lot, and it's easy to catch them. Yes, Joe Rogan, it has been easy to catch Bob Lazar lying about his education, lying about being a physicist at Los Alamos, lying about being a scientist, lying about having a particle accelerator in his bedroom that could transmute elements, and more and more. The list goes on and on if you don't just blindly believe the carefully constructed narrative that you're being spoon-fed by Jeremy Corbell. If you just peel back a few layers here of deception, it can be easily, overwhelmingly proved that Bob Lazar lied multiple times. So to say, Joe Rogan also says, if Bob is a liar, he's a great liar. He's great at it because he has been telling the same lie for 30 years. But that is another talking point of the Bob Lazar camp, that Bob Lazar's story never changed. No, his story changed multiple times. There's been things about his story that has changed, new additions. The story is constantly evolving. Oh, the hand scanner. The story always changes if you've been paying attention since 1989. And I, fortunately, unfortunately, have been paying incredibly close attention to all of this since 1989. The story changes, okay? Also, Joe Rogan claims, talks about, Bob Lazar must be telling the truth. After all, how would he know about element 115? Well, I am aware, and I have shouted it from the rooftops, that every scientist was aware of element 115 before Bob Lazar talked about it. In fact, element 115 had been predicted even in high school chemistry books. I have a high school chemistry book from, I believe, 1971 that has element 115 on the periodic table as not yet synthesized or discovered. But they have predicted it in chemistry books since at least the 1970s. Bob Lazar predicting element 115 is not evidence. It is not proof that he worked on alien spacecraft. It is not proof he was a scientist, because we can overwhelmingly prove that his education is fake. He doesn't have master's thesis. You have to have a science degree to be a scientist. He was never a scientist. We can talk to people who worked with him at Los Alamos who all say, multiple on the record sources say, he was never a physicist. He was a technician, an electronics technician. The same thing I've been saying he was for years. The evidence is overwhelming that Bob Lazar has lied time and time again. And what we get from Jeremy Corbell is a carefully constructed, spoon-fed narrative of only the parts of the story that he believes supports Bob being, a scientist and working for the government. Neither of those things can be proven. He can't prove that he was a scientist. He can't prove his education. He can't prove he ever worked for the government. And don't come at me with that fake W-2 IRS form. It's fake. It's not his real Social Security number on that. It's fake. His W-2 is fake. Just like Bob, being a scientist is fake. Just like his education is fake. So this argument from the Bob Lazar camp that we always get, Bob Lazar must be telling the truth about those aliens because he predicted element 115 before anyone. Garbage. That's garbage, fake, false information. It's disinformation peddled by disinformation peddlers like George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell, who have profited to the tune of millions off of this fake story. It's not real information. It's fake. There are multiple scientists who predicted both element 115 and the island of stability. In fact, Alien Scientist just published on Twitter a list of those, and we can give you the real and accurate information where, Jeremy Corbell has to give you false information saying that Bob Lazar predicted element 115 before anybody knew about it. No, friends, according to alien scientist, who, by the way, is a real physicist with a real physics degree. He's a real scientist. He says on Twitter today, here is a list of scientists who predicted and published on element 115 in the island of stability decades, friends, before Bob Lazar. Those people would be Yuri Oganesyan, Peter Armbruster, Gottfried Musenberg, Glenn T. Seaborg, George Flaroff, Maria Goupert-Meyer, J. Hans D. Jensen, etc. So apparently, many scientists talked about and even predicted the discovery of element 115 decades before Bob Lazar did. History matters. History matters. You can't make nonsensical, stupid statements like only Bob Lazar predicted this before anybody discovered it. No. Read a science book, Jeremy Corbell. You're too dumb to do this well. You're too dumb. I don't understand how you could sit there with a straight face and lie through your teeth. You have to know that other people predicted element 115 long before Bob Lazar. You have to know. I know you know this part because I sent you portions of a 1971 high school chemistry book before your documentary, which shows very clearly that even in a high school chemistry book, people predicted element 115 before Bob Lazar in 1971 and further back, I believe. But that's one example I was able to find. Now, when we get into Jeremy Corbell's statements that he made during this short clip, it gets real deep in here, friends. It gets real deep. It's the bull gets so deep that you need waders. And Jeremy Corbell pulls out what all these UFO hucksters pull out. The trust me dude maneuver. This story is true, and people told me this. What are their names? Jeremy Corbell, can myself or other researchers interview your so-called sources and find out that they did indeed tell you this information, or is this a bluff? Trust me, dude, is not evidence. Trust me, dude, is a bluff. It's bull. It's how fabricators of fake stories and UFO profiteers profit from stupid people. The trust me, dude maneuver used to work. Trust me, dude, I have anonymous sources. The sources are always anonymous. He will never release the sources. And I challenge him. I'm calling his bluff. He bluffed hugely on Joe Rogan. This was a huge bluff. And he thinks nobody will call his bluff. But I'm going to, and I encourage you to as well. When somebody's bluffing and they're full of crap, you need to call the bluff. So today, with Jeremy Corbell, I'm calling the bluff. Here is direct quotes from Jeremy Corbell. And by the way, Corbell, don't try to weasel out of this. Don't try to weasel out of what you said, because we've got quotes here from your appearance there, right? He says, quote, I try to call BS on Bob. I tried so many times. When? How come you ignore all the evidence that people like me send you that proves that Bob Lazar was a liar? If you really wanted to call bull on Bob Lazar, you would use the evidence that I have provided you, that people like alien scientists have provided you, that people like Solar Marshall have provided you. Why don't you ask Bob Lazar some questions about the overwhelming on-the-record evidence, real evidence that we, 3 researchers and more people, have sent you? Why don't you ask, if you're really trying to call bull on Bob Lazar, why don't you ask him real questions like, hey, Bob, you said you were a physicist at Los Alamos. How come your former supervisor and the guy who was running the lab that you claim to work in says you were never a scientist? He says you were never a physicist. He says that you were an electronics technician. Why don't you ask Bob Lazar that if you're trying to call bull on him? You must not be trying too hard. Why don't you call bull on his education? Why don't you call bull and ask his mother and his sister if they attended his Caltech and MIT graduation? If you were really trying to call bull on him, you would do those things, but you never do. You never do. All we get from you is the carefully crafted narrative. the careful construct that this is a true story that you have created. But in order for that construct to work, all of us have to ignore all of the overwhelming evidence, all of the overwhelming number of on-the-record sources that say Bob Lazar lied about at least parts of his story. We have to ignore all of that in order for this Jeremy Corbell, George Knapp, Bob Lazar construct of bullshittery to work. It doesn't work unless you ignore evidence. And if you have to ignore evidence in order to make a story true, if you have to ignore all the evidence the story isn't true, then that's a pretty good indication that the story is not true. We have another quote from him. He says, quote, recently, this is Jeremy Corbell, he says, quote, recently, I had it verified that he did work at Area 51, unquote. Great, great. Well, we're going to call your bluff, Jeremy Corbell. Who verified it for you? Can I have their name and telephone number so that I can call them and verify that they verified it for you? Or is this another bluff of yours, an imaginary source that no one else is allowed to speak to, interview, or get information from? If your source is an on-the-record real source, release his name. Who told you Bob Lazar worked at Area 51? Because we have on-the-record sources that say Bob Lazar never stepped foot on Area 51. And apparently, you have an anonymous source that you won't share with someone. If we're looking at things from a scale point of view, our scale destroys yours because we have real names, real histories of people, verified sources, verified educations, verified credentials, verified work history that say Bob Lazar never stepped foot on Area 51. But you're going to try to counter that, right? I think what's happening here is that he is aware of the overwhelming evidence we have presented here on Truth Seekers that Bob Lazar never stepped foot on Area 51. So now he needs to bluff his way out of two things. First of all, he has to bluff his way out of addressing the overwhelming on-the-record statements that we have proving Bob Lazar was never on a Janet airline flight, proving that Bob Lazar never stepped foot on Area 51 as he claimed. What does Jeremy Corbell have? We have on-the-record real sources anybody can talk to, anybody can verify that we can prove worked at Area 51 at the time Bob claimed to. What does Jeremy Corbell have? He has anonymous sources that no one else is allowed to interview, okay? Next, he gets into Mike Thigpen. He says, I found him. I talked to him multiple times. He did Bob's clearance for the test site. And he also once said that Mike Thigpen, who apparently did Bob Lazar's security clearance, remembered Bob Lazar. But we're going to find out that that is entirely not accurate because, again, somebody got to Mike Thigpen. He always thinks that people aren't going to be able to contradict his bluffs, his lies. But it's very clear that could be done. So I'm going to share my screen here. And this is, of course, from Signals Intelligence, who we've interviewed in the past and found his work to be very credible. So 1 second, let me make sure that we have it queued to the right one. Yes, we do. Someone else, he claims, he's got to cite the one name that he's allowed to say because he didn't think that anybody else would get to that source. But isn't it funny that when he does name a source, people get to that source and that source essentially says, I didn't say that. Did he say I said that? I didn't say that. I don't recall saying that. It happens every time he gives a name. That, my friends, is why most of his sources are anonymous and he won't release names. Because when he does release a name, another researcher calls that person and finds out that Jeremy Corbell largely fabricated what he said that person said. It's ridiculous that he gets away with this. So this is from Signals Intelligence. And here we have, in Jeremy Corbell's 2019 documentary, Corbell said the following regarding contact with Mike Thigpen. After 30 years, and this guy dodging you, I found Mike Thigpen. Apparently he's talking to George Knapp here. I found Thigpen. I couldn't believe it. He's on the East Coast. I've called him. I've talked to him multiple times. He won't go on camera because he doesn't want that kind of put a dark shadow on the work that he did before. But personally, he conveyed to me that it was his job That was exactly what he did in Las Vegas in 1989. And in fact, he remembers Bob Lazar. This is from Jeremy Corbell and his documentary. But more recently, another researcher got on August 4th, Corbell spoke about it again with Joe Rogan. He said, I know I had a guy. I found the guy after 30 years. He wouldn't talk with George, the guy who did Bob's security clearance. I found him. I talked to him multiple times about this, and he did clearance for Bob for the test site. This is from this clip that we tried to share and got shut down earlier. Researcher signals intelligence. I spoke with Mike Thigpen in August of 2021 to confirm Corbell's account of their conversations. When asked if he had recollection of Mr. Lazar or conducting a background investigation on him, here's what he had to say. Mike Thigpen, it's possible I don't remember him. No, I only got knowledge of him, where I recall it, after he got into the news. I did stop and pause to listen when they threw my name up in this story. Author, you did not remember Mr. Lazar. As far as you are aware, you did not conduct a background clearance investigation on him. Thigpen, as far as I recall, I did so many of them. If I did his background, and I'm not saying I did it at all, but if I did, I didn't recall him. So here we have Jeremy Corbell apparently lying and saying Mike Thigpen remembered him. Another researcher gets to Mike Thigpen who says, I didn't recall him. Author, you did not tell Mr. Corbell that you remembered Bob? Thigpen, personally, no. I don't know Bob. I don't recall meeting him. If I told him I did, it was an error. I certainly didn't mean to say or imply that to Mr. Corbell. It should be noted, Mr. Thigpen readily agreed to allow the publication of this interview. So what we get is contradictory statements when it comes to Thigpen. Did he really say that? Well, he doesn't remember saying that to Corbell. But this isn't the first time that we've caught Corbell putting words in sources' mouths that they later say, I never said that. Okay. So also Corbell says, Mike Thigpen, I found him. I talked to him multiple times. He did Bob's clearance for the test site. It's not clear that he did Bob's clearance for the test site. He may have. He may not have. Did he remember Bob Lazar? No. He only became aware of Bob Lazar after Bob Lazar hit the news. So Corbell's statements are disingenuous and dishonest at the very, very best. Next, Jeremy Corbell says, quote, people that have position to access that information said, I just want you to know Bob Lazar worked there, meaning Area 51. And again, I say that this is a bluff. Jeremy Corbell, who are those people that have a position to access that information that you're citing as a source? Or are these more imaginary friends? Or are these more people whose mouths you're putting words into? Why can't I go and see those and talk to those, quote, people that have position to access that information who said, I just want you to know he worked there? Let's get their names. Let's get them on the record. I want to interview them and hear how they know that Bob Lazar worked there, because we have on the record source that we've named with a real name and a real work history that said that's not the case. He never stepped foot on Area 51. He never worked there. He never flew in there. He never flew out there. Next, Jeremy Corbell says, I have people that were out there that saw him on a Janet flight. Again, who are these sources? Are these imaginary friends of yours, Jeremy Corbell? Or can any researcher verify that you're not lying here when you say, quote, I have people that were out there that saw him on the Janet flight, unquote? Great, great. Why don't you release their names so the rest of us researchers can talk to those people and prove this on the record source that we have here is not accurate? Is he going to do that? No. This is all a bluff. Jeremy Corbell is bluffing out the wazoo here. He has now named 2 anonymous sources to counteract our on the record, non-anonymous, real person source that we can verify worked at Area 51 as a security specialist, who said he never flew on Janet Airlines and said he never stepped foot on Area 51. Corbell is aware of this information spreading around. It's probably bothering him. He's got to figure out a way to counteract that. Oh, I know. Maybe I'll just say stuff without any backup, without any evidence, without any corroboration. I'll just say, quote, people that have position to access that information said, hey, I just want you to know he worked there, unquote. And another more people, anonymous people said, quote, I have people that were out there that saw him on a Janet flight, unquote. Great. Then that means you have two names that you could release right now, right? So that myself, Signals Intelligence, Alien Scientist, Solar Marshal, Victor Colliero, and other researchers, or any researcher really, can go and verify that that's what they told you. Or is this a bluff, and are you getting caught lying through your teeth again, making up stuff? I believe he just makes up stuff, kind of like those pyramid-shaped UFOs, spaceships, the pyramid-shaped spaceships. I believe that he makes things up. I'm entitled to my opinion. And I also believe that he massages the data in his favor, right? In the case of the pyramid-shaped UFOs, somebody muted the audio. Could it be because later a very similar, or some say same video came out where the audio was someone on the ship saying, these are drones flying over our ship? Isn't it convenient that somebody saying drones may have gotten muted out of Jeremy Corbell's so-called evidence of pyramid flying saucers? Sorry, pyramid-shaped alien spacecraft. And even after the Pentagon itself came out and said those were drones and it was an artifact of a triangle aperture on a night vision scope that created those pyramid images, they weren't really pyramid-shaped, they were drones. Even after that, Jeremy Corbell again invented more anonymous sources. No, I have sources that were on the ship that said they were definitely pyramid-shaped alien spacecraft. Great, release the sources. It's very simple, Jeremy Corbell. If you don't want people to think that you're just making up stuff and lying and inventing fake sources, now you have, what is that, 3, 4 anonymous sources that you need to prove your alien stories are true? Friends, there should exist a weight of the evidence. And if here at Truth Seekers, we have on the record sources, we have real names, we have provable work histories of people that really worked at Area 51, saying that Bob Lazar never stepped foot on the base and never flew on Janet Airlines, and also saying that they drove out, they've been all over the base, and there was no such thing as the so-called secret flying saucer base, as he described, no guard shack, no road, nothing. That's a real source with a real name that we can prove worked at Area 51. And what do we have on Jeremy Corbell's side? We have a bunch of anonymous sources, and we have, trust me, dude, I'm not trusting a guy who I caught lying many, many times already. A guy who essentially says before making a documentary, if the story's not true, then there's no documentary deal. The story has to be true for me to get a deal, and then ignores all of the overwhelming, supportive, and substantial, overwhelming evidence that shows that Bob Lazar has been caught lying time and time and time and time again. I'm not taking, trust me, dude, from a guy like that. Jeremy Corbell has a conflict of interest because his income is directly tied to people being interested in this story. And honestly, if the whole story is fake, who's going to have interest in it? Not many people. An awful lot more people will have interest in it, in that story, if they believe the story is true. So what we're getting from Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, who's been selling this story for 30 years, is a very carefully constructed narrative, a construct of thrown together information designed specifically and curated specifically to convince you that the story is true. Friends, don't be so foolish. Peel back just one single layer of their deception, of these UFO hucksters' deception. Peel back a single layer and see the truth is right out there. These UFO hucksters are simply neglecting to give you all of the evidence. And this is how a hoax works. And this is how a fake story makes millions and millions of dollars. It is the lie by omission. I am convinced, and by the way, this is my opinion, but I'm entitled to it. I am absolutely convinced that George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell have all of the evidence that we have presented here on this channel. And one has to ask themselves, if they have all of that evidence, the same evidence that we've presented here that show overwhelmingly that Bob Lazar has lied multiple times, the overwhelming evidence his education is fake, the overwhelming evidence that he was never a scientist, the overwhelming evidence that he lied about being a physicist at Los Alamos, the overwhelming evidence that he lied about a lot of stupid things, kind of like he lied about having a particle accelerator in his bedroom. You see, friends, they don't want you to see the lies. They just want you to see their spoon-fed, carefully constructed narrative so that they can continue to profit from this provably fake story. Bob Lazar, as much as I love the story, Bob Lazar was never a scientist. Bob Lazar is a convicted pimp who ran a whorehouse. Friends, scientists don't just wake up one day and say, you know what? I'm going to run a whorehouse. It doesn't happen. But maybe, just maybe, con artists are the same kind of people that might wake up one day and decide to run a whorehouse. We should carefully consider all of the evidence in this case. But unfortunately, especially for Joe Rogan, who has been led down this dark tunnel path that they want him down so that they can use him to continue selling the story, they have purposefully not given Joe Rogan all of the evidence. But it's not just Joe Rogan. They have not just manipulated Joe Rogan into helping them sell this fake story and continue to profit from it. They have left out all of this evidence. They have lied by omission to everyone. It's not just Joe Rogan. And I don't blame Joe Rogan if he's only being given one side of the story and he has not taken the time, and I get it, it takes time to dig through all this stuff. If Joe Rogan has not taken the time to dig through all of this overwhelming evidence that we have here, I forgive him. But I really think that he has a responsibility to his viewers to see the other side of the coin. Maybe do a show with someone like me or alien scientists, maybe both of us, who can explain why, exactly why, Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp are manipulating you, Joe Rogan. Jeremy Corbell, George Knapp, and Bob Lazar are purposefully leading you down a dark path and not letting you see the light. I have nothing to hide. I don't have a horse in this race. I'm not going to make more money if people believe Bob Lazar is telling the truth or if people believe Bob Lazar is a liar. My only interest in this story from when I was a child in 1989 is seeing if the story is true. For a long time, I was a true believer in this story. But once you begin to peel back the layers of deception, this entire story falls apart. And the sad thing here is that Jeremy Corbell and Bob Lazar and George Knapp, I believe, have been able to fool Joe Rogan into helping them to profit. Certainly, millions more people have seen this documentary, which is a joke, a documentary which leaves out all the evidence, leaves out every bit of evidence that people deserve to have that Bob Lazar is a liar and a fraud. That's not a documentary to me. That's a work of fiction. They have created a work of fiction here because although they're not directly lying to you in that documentary, they're lying to you by omission, by purposefully crafting the story and let's just ignore the elephants in the room. Let's ignore all the evidence found on Truth Seekers, evidence found on Alien Scientists and other channels that prove conclusively that Bob Lazar is a fraud. And so is anybody pushing the story. They have to know it's fake, friends. They have the same evidence we do. They've had to have read through the same stuff I did. And instead of reporting to their audience this evidence, this overwhelming evidence, what do? They ignore it or they try to explain it away. This doesn't work, friends. This is not how real investigative journalists do their thing. This is not how real documentary filmmakers do their thing. This entire story has been a carefully crafted lie. And it has generated millions of dollars for certain people. Sadly, Joe Rogan has gone down a terrible path here because he has helped them amplify their carefully constructed illusion of a true story. And, my hope and prayer is that Joe Rogan will get the other information, will get the other evidence and share it with his audience. I think it's his responsibility to do so. Now, I just want to mention again that I apologize. We also had some technical issues during the playing of that video where I was muted for some time. These things happen. It's a live show. I apologize for it happening. It is now 2:22 a.m. in the morning. And while I would much prefer to be sleeping, I wanted to do two things tonight. One, repair this broadcast without playing the Joe Rogan clip, just using quotes so that I can report this story. And two, I wanted to fix the fact that for 5 minutes or maybe a little bit more, my microphone was muted. And I apologize for that happening. We're taking steps to make sure it won't ever happen again. And to those nasty people who had a lot of nasty comments to say, I always think of that biblical thing, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Are you perfect? I'm not perfect. Mistakes happen, and problems, especially technical problems, happen with a live show. And while I regret that it happened, these things do happen. I noticed that there were some people, and they are, of course, supporters of the lying UFO hucksters who are selling this fake story, pounced on the fact that we had technical problems, even accusing me of ignoring the live chat. Nothing could be further from the truth. Those of you who know me know two things. First of all, I'm visually impaired. I have a paralyzed eye, which makes monitoring the live chat and doing the presentation at the same time difficult. Now, I've taken steps. We're going to have a second computer or second monitor just playing the live chat. I'll glance over at it every minute or so, I don't know, in order to make sure that me being muted for 5 minutes or more doesn't ever happen again. But again, these are mistakes that happen. And, I'm really disappointed that a bunch of people jumped all over me claiming I ignore the live chat. Those of you who know this show know that what I generally do when we have a long presentation to get through is I focus on the presentation first so that we present all the information, all the evidence that we have to present, and then we go to the live chat and take comments and questions and suggestions. No, I'm not ignoring the live chat. I was concentrating or focusing on the presentation at the time that my microphone was muted and I was unaware of that. So I've given the chat room monitors my personal cell phone number, which I will keep in my pocket, and advise them if that ever happens again, just call me. I also, several mistakes then from tonight's earlier live broadcast, I did not have my cell phone with me. It was in the whole other side of the house. And this is a huge house, so I wouldn't have heard it if you were ringing or pinging me on Facebook. But my thanks to all those people who tried to let me know that we were having that problem. It is much, much appreciated. As far as the rest of you who want to make personal attacks about a technical problem, I would say attack the evidence we present, attack the on the record sources that we have here. Don't attack us for having a technical problem. That can happen to anybody. It's a live show. But I do regret it happening. I'm sorry that it happened, and we will take steps to make sure that it doesn't happen again. The good news is this happened once before, and then it didn't happen for like a year because I was a little more on the ball. I apologize. I was intensely focused on what Corbell and Rogan were saying and forgot that I had muted the microphone to cough. It's called a cough button. So, but it is what it is. Now, insofar as this other issue, there's nothing I can do about the fact that if you play a Joe Rogan clip on YouTube, they block your entire video. So we had to take it out, and I'm sorry for that. It's much better to sit and watch these two people have a conversation and offer commentary on top of it But we weren't able to do that because apparently if we use even a 5-second clip from the Joe Rogan Experience, they block your entire, I don't know what our show was, over 2 hours, almost 2.5 hours. They block your entire broadcast. So there's nothing else that we could do but to do it this way. And what we're going to do now is just go back to the rest of the broadcast. I apologize for this Band-Aid, but this is the only way that I could figure out how to fix this broadcast and put it back up so that everybody could experience it. My thanks to all of you, and thank you to those who are understanding that live shows have live problems. Let's just focus on doing better going forward. Of course, Jeremy Corbell claims that he got to Mike Thigpen, who did the clearance for Bob Lazar to be able to work at Area 51, and claimed that Mike Thigpen said a lot of things that it now appears very clear that Mike Thigpen didn't say those things. And here I will copy this and put it in the live chat. This link, which is again from another researcher, which we have interviewed previously here and whose work we found to be very credible. So, author, just to be clear, Bob was not a physicist at the lab. Fred, no. Do you know how long he worked there for? Fred, a matter of a few months. And then again, it's been 40 years. It was less than a year. Author, Bob's wife also worked at the lab. Her name was Carol Lazar. Fred, yep, again, as a contract technician. So both Bob Lazar and his wife at the time were contract technicians. This is another verification that Bob Lazar was never a physicist at the lab. Author, I was told that she had a contract to fix alpha probes. Do you have an awareness of that? Fred, to fix what? I guess they had a contract to fix the alpha radiation probes. Fred, yes, the detectors. They basically had a thin foil window which was easily damaged, and they had set up to replace the busted windows. Author, do you have any recollection of anything that happened after you left the lab? Fred, well, he did run a 1-hour photo processing business. At some point, he shut down and left. Fred referred him to Joe Vianetti, who we've mentioned before. The following excerpts were from an interview conducted. So I identified and interviewed one more former lab employee who worked in a scientific role at Mason's facility of Bob Lazar, although because he had worked closely with John Jarmer and heard about Bob through him and other colleagues in a water cooler setting, he did not want to be identified. Henry, is it possible this is the guy out of Las Vegas? Yes, that's right. He would have been the one. Henry, I've heard the name, heard a few things about him. Author, I've talked to a couple of people at the lab who do remember him. I was wondering if you have any recollection of the time that he was there, what might he have done? Henry, I was there from 72 to 2008. Well, but most of the time I was always at the linear accelerator and mostly to do in the engineering department. I heard his name, bandied about a few times, and I really didn't know anything about him there. Author, do you remember anything you heard about him while he was working at the lab? Henry, well, unfortunately, one guy I know that worked for him for a while was Joe King. He got killed in a motorcycle wreck. Was Joe King a technician? Henry, yes. Author, I know there were 3 technicians, Joe Vianetti, Bob, and one more. Yeah, I knew about Vianetti. Another tech who worked there for a long time was Joe King. But Joe, he got killed in a motorcycle wreck. I don't know, 20 years ago, I guess. I told Henry about a conversation with John Jarmer and asked if John had ever shared anything about Bob. Henry, yeah, I had heard John mention him because I worked with John for a long time. Author, I know John didn't seem to have a high opinion of Bob. Henry, yes, that's what I think, possibly say that. I believe that would be John's opinion. Author, did he tell you anything specific or just Bob's general work? Henry, no, just the thing he ever said mostly was the work ethic, which apparently he didn't think was very high. And John believed in. John was out there many hours every day. He believed in working. Author, Bob wrote a book a couple of years ago, and he talked about pulling, I guess, pranks at the lab, which would be, I think, frowned upon. Henry, yeah, there was a lot of stuff out there that didn't go over real well with those fairly serious people, doing some serious work. So that sort of thing was frowned upon pretty highly. Author, from what I understand, he worked out there for less than a year. Henry, yeah, it was very short, pretty short span. I heard a few things, but that was, old lab grapevine. Author, would you be able to share with me anything you heard, even things that were just water cooler talk? Henry, the only thing I can remember ever really hearing was, the guy didn't do anything while he was there, apparently. And I know that's what John thought, that he was a complete waste of time. Author, I spoke to another man who had worked around Bob. What he told me was that at some point Bob has been making long-distance calls on the laboratory phones to run a side business, and that this other gentleman said Bob was let go after using the phone system for a side business had come to light or come to management's attention. Henry, I remember the lab where there were a number of people that left under similar circumstances. They thought that would be okay, that there were people that seemed to think because the government was paying for it that it was okay. Author, it's funny, the lab directory specifically talks about making personal long-distance calls. It does seem that they had maybe run into that problem before. Henry, they definitely did. There were, I remember, places out there where, there would be phones in buildings that had experiments in them before the long system was still operable. It would be horrendous bills ran up, everywhere in the world. And I know that kind of thing went on. And here is the important part. My recollection is that he was a technician, which would not be a physicist. I'm sure he wasn't a physicist, because if he was, I would have known him well, because I was a physicist. And let me back that up just a little bit. He was at unintelligible, we called it. That was the accelerator when I knew about him. And he was off in an adjacent building, which was a little bit separated from the others. I knew he was over there because of his weird name, because when he fired that car up, you could hear it all over town. And that's miles, I think. I think I never met him. I would put quite a bit of money on whether he was a physicist or not. And I would say no. I think he was a technician of some sort, but I couldn't tell you what kind of technician. And here we have another physicist. So listen, all of these people on the record sources that actually worked at Los Alamos say that Bob Lazar was a technician. We've got Mike Thigpen, and others who Corbell has attributed statements to that don't appear to pan out. Why is Corbell fabricating statements from people that worked with Bob? When you've reached them, it turns out that those statements are not true. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to check in with our live chat. This will conclude what I have to share with you for tonight. All I can say is that I'm extremely disappointed in Joe Rogan for not doing any responsible work. He has not been. And I apologize again for being on mute. I noticed somebody even sent a super chat to try to get my attention. I apologize. Thank you very much. Okay. Let's get to the super chats. Let me share this. We share each and every super chat. It's a great way to help support our show. So if you want to support the show, there's a money button down there. Otherwise, you can make a PayPal pledge or Cash App pledge. Instructions to do so are in the description of the video. UFO John Doe, kind and generous, $1.99. You've been on mute for 5 minutes. Yeah, I apologize. Joe K. Steve, you are muted. Again, very kind of you, and I apologize so much. I'm going to make sure that I set the live chat to be in the second screen. Probably because of my visual impairment, I have a hard time. Sometimes I put it on mute because I'm coughing or something. It's like the cough button. And then I forget it's on, and I keep talking for 5 or 10 minutes. I apologize. We're going to fix this in edit. UFO John Doe, with a kind and generous $9.99, says, but Stephen, isn't it possible that if Lazar could walk out of S4 with element 115, that could have erased his name from the sign-in check-in sheet with a number 2 pencil eraser? Laugh out loud. Yeah, see, that's the problem. You gotta make excuses. All these Bob Lazar believers have to make incredible amount of excuses for just why. Oh, I got blurry like Bigfoot. They have to make an incredible amount of excuses and do an incredible amount of mental gymnastics just to believe that Bob Lazar is still telling the truth. You have to believe the Men in Black erased his records. I guess you have to believe that the Men in Black went to his former supervisors and told them to lie and say he was never a physicist. You have to believe that the Men in Black crawled into every dusty attic and garage and stole every single yearbook of all those other students at MIT and Caltech out of their houses, sanitized them of any mention of Bob Lazar or pictures of Bob Lazar or any record of Bob Lazar in those yearbooks, and then sneaked back in their houses and put them all back. You have to believe that it's perfectly acceptable for you to take one polygraph and it come back inconclusive, then take a second polygraph that comes back deceptive or you failed it, and then you get to take 3 more polygraphs. That's not how polygraphs work. You get one bite at the apple. You don't just keep giving people lie detector tests until they pass. We've got Jeremy Corbell with the sin of omission. He leaves all of this facts and evidence out. There are now something like, I think, 5 on-the-record sources, all of which we can verify worked at Los Alamos, that all say he was not a physicist. He was never a physicist. He was a technician, which really just creates more questions, because why, when he was interviewed about his rocket car, did he lie to the newspaper reporter and say, I'm a physicist, if he was indeed just a technician? And if this is true, and I believe it is, that he was never a physicist, he was actually a technician at Los Alamos, electronics technician, this establishes that Bob Lazar lies to people to tell tall tales. Now, did he have a rocket car? Yes, but alien scientists and others figured out that Bob Lazar grew up, I believe it was his next door neighbor that was building rocket engines. And that was his rocket engine, his neighbor's, on his bike. Who knows where he got the rocket engine to jam in some car in the 80s. Maybe he built it. But building a rocket engine does not mean you're a scientist. It means you're a science geek and you're good at building things. And this is, of course, not proof that he worked on alien spacecraft. Nobody can show me any proof that he actually worked on alien spacecraft. And good evidence that he's been caught lying again and again and again and again. But we're supposed to believe him about the aliens? It doesn't make sense. UFO John Doe says, it was a great show regardless of the Muse issue. I think most were trying to flag you down. What do you think of his UFO jellyfish story? Oh, UFO John Doe, thank you for your kindness, your generosity, and support. Member UFO John Doe, I want to remind you that besides the Bob Lazar stuff in this interview, Jeremy Corbell made a great number of new ridiculous, fantastical claims with absolutely no evidence. For example, Jeremy Corbell now claims that the United States government is shooting at and shooting down jellyfish-shaped UAP or UFOs. I don't understand it. Look, if you're going to make fantastical claims like that, maybe have some evidence, a video, a photograph, an on-the-record statement with somebody who actually worked on a Navy ship that shot at jellyfish-shaped flying saucers, jellyfish-shaped UFOs or UAP. Maybe have some evidence, but we don't get that. Just like Jeremy Corbell claimed that everybody was wrong about those pyramid-shaped spaceships, and he's got sources, and he's going to prove they were really pyramid-shaped spaceships. Bull. It's been how long now, Jeremy? Where's the proof? Where's those on-the-record statements from people we can verify worked on the Navy ships and saw those pyramid spaceships? Those were drones. And I believe that Jeremy Corbell knew they were drones. And that would mean that he was extremely deceptive. Some people argue that he purposefully cut out the audio from his videos because in the audio, they're saying these are drones. And we have those videos here on our site, on our channel here, with the audio where one of the people in the video is saying these are drones and these are their position above our ship. These are drones. Why would he mute the audio? Could it be because somebody on that video was saying these are drones? And a story about drones flying around a Navy ship doesn't sell quite as good as a story about pyramid-shaped flying alien spaceships. We've got John Lies with a kind and generous $13.33 super chat says Corbell probably subscribes to Third Phase of Moon. Yeah, I believe that he does, right? Joe K asked, Stephen, on the flip side, what part of Lazar's story do you like? Well, I think it would make a great science fiction story, the whole story, like a renegade scientist, right? He gets hired by the government to back engineer flying saucer technology from off-world space vehicles that we somehow got from alien beings. It's a great story. It would make a great science fiction movie. And honestly, Gene Huff and Bob Lazar thought that they were going to get that Hollywood story and they were going to make millions out of this story. Never quite worked out for them. Glitch Loop says, Third Phase of Moon has the most fake subs in ufology. Well, yeah. I don't want to say yeah. I don't know, but it would appear that something's not right with their numbers. And that's how you tell who's buying subscribers. If you ask me, this is my personal opinion. I've done, information technology and computer science for a living. I've even handled social media sites for companies and individuals. If somebody has a very, very high number of subscribers and the view count really doesn't reflect that, that would mean they probably purchased a lot of subscribers. Either that or people just subscribed and never watched any of their videos, which doesn't make any sense because generally people subscribe to you so that they can watch your new videos, right? I don't understand people buying subscribers. I have somebody I used to know or buying views. I have somebody that I used to know who is now claiming that his latest music video got 300,000 views. But there's a huge problem with that, where he got 300,000 views somehow, but only got like 6 comments on the video. That doesn't happen. If you truly got 300,000 views, you would have thousands of comments on the video, at least. But he wants people to believe that his music video is so good and his new song is so good that he got 300,000 views on it. I call bull. It's garbage. There's no way you got 300,000 views and only 6 or 8 comments. It doesn't happen unless you buy views, because your ego is so pathetic that you want to, all you get when you buy views or subscribers is bragging rights. You get to tell your stupid friends, look, I have 100,000 subscribers. Doesn't matter if you purchased half of them, right? Or look, I got 300,000 views on my band's latest music video. It doesn't matter. Those 300,000 fake views aren't going to buy your music. So it doesn't convert. It's strictly for people's ego, right? And for bragging rights. It's just ridiculous. Unidentified S4 says minimum 10,000 comments. Yeah, I agree with you. Prop says 300,000 views and 6 comments. Sus. Yeah, very suspect. Very suspect. Glitch Loop says, no doubt, Third Phase of Moon having thousands of fake subs. I don't know. I believe that a lot of UFO-related shows have bought subscribers. But I always advise people against it. Sometimes people ask me, in the past, when I ran people's social media and their online presence, rappers especially were like, yo, cuz I'm coming out with a new music video. I need you to get me 100,000 views. And I'm like, nobody's ever heard of you. I can't get you 100,000 real views. The only way you're getting 100,000 views is if you buy them from a bot farm in Malaysia, the Philippines, or China. And they would say, well, let's do that. And I would advise against it because it does nothing for you. Getting 100,000 fake views on your project does nothing for you. 100,000 fake bot views are not buying your album on iTunes. It does nothing for you except bragging rights. And that's what some people want. They just want the bragging rights to say, oh, I have so many 100,000s of subscribers. Everything we do here is entirely organic. I'm proud of that. I will never buy subscribers. I will never buy comments. Did you know that? Some people buy comments. You know how you tell those? Usually it's something like great video, awesome video, great video, awesome video. And these stupid people buy comments, and then you look in their comments, great video, great video, great video, great video, by 8,000 different accounts. That doesn't happen. 8,000 different YouTube accounts don't all leave the same comment, but bot commenters do. It's ridiculous and it's garbage, you know? So any more comments or questions for me, please put them in all capital letters. The Sixth Sense says, when these bots are removed by YouTube, the fake views and subs go with them. Yeah, you might see that when people buy subscribers, eventually YouTube tweaks the algorithm to get rid of the fake views and the fake subscribers, and you see people's videos and subscriber counts suddenly going down. That's another good indicator that people just do this for their ego. Visitor asks, what would make him make up this story? Money, disinformation, kind of sad that it is fake. Yeah, I believe that this was all a money-making scheme, because from the very start, he tried to cash in on his story. You know, if you really were a renegade scientist and you worked on real alien spacecraft, would the next thing you do be to make a VHS tape telling everybody about it for $30? That's, to me, is a very good indication. And he always says, like, oh, I've got more important science things to do. No, you don't. No, he doesn't. He's running a company that sells science curiosities. You know, you could buy glow-in-the-dark paint from him, or glassware, I guess, if you want to start a meth lab. I don't recommend that. You know, he sells science toys, basically. You can't be making a great living doing that. Joe K with a kind and generous $2.79 says, great video. Well, thank you. I'm sorry once again for the great mute. God, I got to be more careful. What I will say is the good news is that happens once in a while. That has happened to us before here. And every time it happens, I'm sure on the ball for the next, 6 months, making sure that I'm not muted while I'm talking, right? Yes, Friedman and I did, and no one remembers him at MIT, and he could not name classmates. Of course he couldn't. You can only name classmates if you actually go there, you know? What does a bot farmer call themselves? A media acceleration agent. Just curious. Usually they lie to you and say that they'll get you organic views. Another thing that people should be aware of is that I believe that YouTube is strongly opposed to bot stuff because they're selling ads. So if you use bots on your channel, you could get your whole channel deleted for invalid click activity. I know several people who lost their channels because they thought it would be a good idea to try to boost their channel with more views, more subscribers, but these were fake, right? B. Baker says, Truth Seekers needs to be on Joe Rogan to get the truth on Lazar out. Let's start a campaign. Hey, if you want to tweet this video, Adam, that might be helpful. But wait until we download it and re-upload it, right? Glitch Loop says, stop buying that guy's subscribers. Yeah. And since that guy likes to tell everybody that he has the truth about Bob Lazar because he got it from me and not mention us, we don't mention him. We don't mention him here. Well, I got a bug. I got the door open here. Oh, there we go. Out the door, buddy. 1 second. There we go. Have the door open here. We're still in the midst of a heat wave. I can't wait. There's 3 or 4 more weeks until I can go back to my normal studio, and I can't wait because we set up this temporary studio. It's really not ideal. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to go back to the old studio. I got all the multiple camera setup working. The backdrops are improved. The lighting in there, everything is better over there. But because it's so hot in that attic room of mine that the normal studio is in, we just can't use it for a few months in the summer. Yes, Cosmic Neighbor says, third phase of moon has 800,000 subs and averages 30,000 views. Yeah, that's a real problem. That's a real problem. That should not be. That definitely should not be. And, you know, what I would say is if their UFO videos are fake, maybe their subscribers are fake too. If somebody's willing to fake UFO videos, you think they're not willing to fake subscribers or buy subscribers? And by the way, you know, I'm just commenting on what people are saying in the live chat. I don't know if they buy subscribers, but people are discussing that in the live chat, given their huge number of subscribers and incredibly low number of views, right? Kepsa says the Twitter purge a few months ago where all the Democrats lost followers was hilarious. You know, I'm not on either side, Kepsta, either Democrat or Republican. I'm independent and always will be, because I think both sides are criminals. And just because you pick one side that you decide is less criminal than the other side doesn't make you better. But what I did find interesting is finding out that a full half of Joe Biden's Twitter followers were fake. That's something else. The president of the United States has 50% fake Twitter followers. And why would they artificially pump his numbers up to be fake? Why would you want the president of the United States numbers to not be real? Except maybe they were embarrassed, kind of like a lot of people believe that the like and dislike system on several platforms was tweaked because the government did not like people seeing that Joe Biden would give a speech and get ratioed and he'd have, 800,000 dislikes and 100,000 likes. They did not like people seeing that. Some people have theorized that they stepped on the neck of some of these tech companies to change the like and dislike system. I don't know if that's true, but I find it extremely interesting that there is 50% fake followers on Twitter for the president of the United States. Crazy. Apparently, Cosmic Neighbors is saying half of Twitter accounts are fake, probably more. Yeah, that's what we're hearing now. I wonder if you taxes pay for that. Yeah, maybe they bought fake viewers or fake Twitter followers for him with taxpayer money. Who knows, right? Yeah, it's this whole thing is crazy. Well, friends, we're going to wrap things up here because we're already approaching 2 hours and 30 minutes, and I really need to. I'm going to have to download this video, cut out the part where I was muted, and see if I can fix this and then re-upload it. But I suppose the good news will be that there'll be a debut of this video later tonight or tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll be back at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And yeah, we've got some special surprises for you tonight. Mysterious Oklahoma says if Trump becomes president, the dislikes will be reinstated. I don't know about that. I don't know if they're going to change it, but if they do change it after Biden, that's a pretty good indication that it was all for Biden, right? Twitter themselves created bot accounts. It brings up the company's value, and that's where they got mad when Elon wanted that audited. Yeah. Now, I believe that they may be considered a form of fraud. If half your users are fake and you're selling advertisers based on saying we have this many millions of users and it turns out, no, you don't, half of them are fake, that could be considered a form of fraud. Oh, wow, I didn't hear this. The FBI just raided Trump's Mar-a-Lago home in Florida. Well, that's interesting. Visitor says, I really enjoy your channel. I'm glad I found it. Well, we're glad you found us. We're glad every single person finds us. And that would be a good time for me to remind you that there's 2 ways to support us. The first is by throwing money at us. You can become a Patreon supporter for as little as $1 a month, or you can become a channel member here on YouTube. Just hit that join button for $5 or more a month. And if you become a channel member, you get all the Patreon posts and benefits, plus some YouTube benefits like a member badge and priority reply to your live chat and comments on our videos and a few more goodies. Or you can use the super chat button, throw money at us, PayPal, Cash App. We appreciate all our kind and generous benefactors all over the world. The other way is to like, comment, subscribe, and share these videos on your social media. It really does help. There's something about the cross-linking of all those links to our video being on Facebook, Instagram, wherever, Twitter, and more, that really does help us to rise in the search engines and find the favor of the AI algorithm gods who decide our fate. So if you want to help us, the first way, of course, is to throw money at us, but equally important is to like, comment, subscribe, and share these videos. Also, we love the comments. I try to reply to people's comments, and we're going to go back to pinning my favorite comment on every video. So if you leave a comment that I find to be the best or insightful or a great point, I'm going to pin it, and everyone will get to see it. make sure that you leave some comments. What do you guys think? Should Joe Rogan do more research before just allowing somebody to straight lie on his show? Before allowing somebody to lie by omission and leave out all the evidence? What do you think? Let us know in the comments. Visitor, we did a whole show on that. I talked to, somebody is asking, what do you think the raid was about? The raid was about a murder investigation because apparently somebody bought a dangerous chemical substance. And I always get this wrong. I don't know if it was thallium or thorium. Whatever it was, somebody ordered a very dangerous chemical and may have murdered their wife with it, allegedly. So the government, the FBI, got a search warrant and raided his business to get the sales records. Now, if you listen to Jeremy Corbell and Bob Lazar and George Knapp, there was 50 agents there, and they were there all day. They combed every inch of his business looking for that element 115. Bull. All that is fake. I talked to the sheriff in that town. I talked to some of the FBI agents that were there. There was 10 or 11 people or less in on the raid, not 40 or 50, as Jeremy Corbell, Bob Lazar, and George Knapp have tried to claim. I talked to actual people that were there. They went in. They did have a hazmat team there just because there's all kinds of dangerous chemicals there. Hazmat team went in, cleared everybody else to go in. They went in, they got the sales records, and they left. They weren't even there an hour. According to George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell, they were there all day and all night. They combed through every inch of it. Bull. That never happened. This was a manufactured plot device that the FBI raided Bob Lazar to get those element 115. No. Go talk to the sheriff like I did. Go talk to FBI agents that were there like I did. Go talk to people from the jurisdiction that the crime took place in like I did. And what you will find is a very standard, here's a search warrant, we need some sales records, see you later. They weren't looking for element 115. Everybody that I talked to wasn't even aware of Bob Lazar and his flying saucer stories. They certainly did not have Bob Lazar under surveillance, as Jeremy Corbell claimed in his film. That's all a convenient plot device to sell you a fake story. And just search Bob Lazar in our channel here, and you'll find those previous videos where we talk extensively about the FBI raid having nothing to do with Bob Lazar's fake flying saucer stories. So, you know, it is what it is. You know, he made an engagement ring out of it for Corbell. Yeah, that could be, right? I heard Biden is losing his marbles. Kind of guy you would see vacuuming his garden. Could be. I can't believe that guy is in such cognitive, obvious to me that he's in some sort of cognitive decline, and nobody seems to want to talk about that. I don't know if he's running for re-election, but I hope to God he's not. Somebody close to him should say, you're not up for this. This is the hardest job in the world, I would think. You need somebody healthy to do that job, not somebody who's shaking the hands of people that aren't there when he walks off the stage. This is a problem. And I know you liberals will say, oh, no, that's, you know, people talk about his cognitive decline, but it's just that he has a stuttering problem. Listen, a stuttering problem is not causing you to hallucinate people that aren't there and shake the hands of people that aren't even in the room. You know, that's not stuttering. That's some sort of cognitive problem and decline. But what do I know? I'm no doctor. I'm no psychiatrist. People can make their own choices. But I will tell you this. I almost can't wait for the next election because it's always a circus, and everybody loves a good circus, right? Joe K says, why do you think Lazar's mother backs him? She would know about his schooling. Well, nobody wants to tell the world that the son they raised is a pathological liar who makes up fantastical stories about working on alien spaceships. I do know for a fact that there does not exist any film of her verifying his educational claims. And I'm sorry, I'm a parent. If my son went to MIT, I would know about it. If my son went to Caltech, I would know about it. So we have to ask ourselves, why did Jeremy Corbell never ask the mother or the sister if Bob really attended those schools? Or did he ask and not like the answers, right? And by the way, the question of that triggered him when he was on some show quite a while ago, and he almost yelled and screamed about me, saying, how does he know what questions I asked? How does he know what questions I did or didn't ask the mother? Well, it wasn't in the film, right? Why wasn't it in the film, Jeremy, if you did ask? That's a pretty important piece of information coming straight from the guy's mother. Or did you ask and you didn't like the answer, so that ended up on the cutting room floor? That's what I believe happened. Yeah, so we're going to bounce on out of here, friends. I apologize once again for the technical issues. We'll get that squared away, and I'll figure out a way to fix it. This was an important show to me, so it really bothers me that happened. But these mistakes happen. We're a live show. There's nothing I can do sometimes but roll with the punches. I apologize to the live audience, and that will be fixed for the replay crew as soon as humanly possible. All right, 1 second here. Oh yeah, I'm having trouble. We have to be sure to remind everybody listening in audio podcast land that if you're listening in audio podcast land, you're missing half the fun. Go on over to YouTube, hit that search bar, and put Truth Seekers, one word, in the search bar. The first result that pops up will be a strange guy with sunglasses. That would be me, your host, Stephen Cambion. Once you've found our channel, smash the subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and you too will know when we're about to have another live taping here for the podcast. Go on over to YouTube when you get that notification. Come and be a part of our live chats. You can ask questions. You can comment on every subject that we're discussing and covering. You are most welcome here. And while we appreciate you being in audio podcast land, you really are missing half the fun. Go on over to YouTube. It's Truth Seekers is the channel. Become a channel subscriber, and you'll know when we're doing live shows. So that's all I got for you, friends. Until next time, my name is Stephen Cambion. Good night, and God bless all of you.